So in this video, I'll be showing you how to make very simple but interesting looking necklaces, and how to make this little bail thing that you can clip on to just about anything. So let's get started. So to break everything down, you're basically going to be making one of these. They're very simple to make, and you just need basic hand tools and a little bit of soldering. So you can clip it on like this, and just let it sit there, and position it exactly how you like it, and solder it down. And there you go, you have a bail, extremely simply done, and it actually looks pretty nice. And you're not stuck with only this one styling. You can get creative with it and shape them in different ways. You could use different wire, you can use square, twisted, whatever you want really. It all should work fine. So to start this off, I'm just going to use some 16 gauge brass wire, and it doesn't have to be brass, it could be silver, gold, copper, whatever you want. I just have this on hand, and I like the color contrast. So I'm just going to take a length of it with no actual real measurements. So now that I have this, we need to anneal it, because we need this to be as soft as possible to shape it into the proper shapes. So now that we have this all annealed and soft, we need to make jump rings out of it. You can make jump rings using a jump ring maker if you're going to make a ton of them all at once, or you can use little step mandrels to do the same thing if you're just doing little bits of them. So on top of all that, if you have some assorted drill bits, you can actually use the back end of them to wind around, and they all have different sizes. So that is an option if you don't have anything else on hand. I do highly suggest this if you're going to make a ton of jump rings, and if you're going to be making your own chain or chainmail or anything like that, just get one of these. It'll save you hours upon hours, because you can make hundreds to thousands of rings in minutes once you get everything set up. But for this video, I'm not making thousands of them. I'm just going to make like 3. So I'm going to grab my step mandrel, and this is a very cheap step mandrel that has no sizing on it. So if you measure it, it is a 10 millimeter at its max and a little over 6 on its smallest. And each one is a millimeter increment. So for this, I'm going to be using the 10 millimeter spot of it. I'm just going to take my wire and wrap it around and get it nice and tight. And then wrap again and try to keep all the winding as tight as I can with one another. So this will end up being a little bit more than 10 millimeters, but this will work. You don't need exact measurements for this. So with our little coil like this, we're going to need to saw through the end of it to actually make these individual rings. You can use clippers, but then you need to clean them up. So I just like to saw through it. Alright, so here's our rings. I ended up with 4 of them. So I want to connect these now, so I'm just going to use some pliers to make it a little bit easier. And make sure you line up the 2 ends. And I need to do that to all of them. All we need to do now is solder them. So in order to solder these shut, I'm just going to be using a charcoal block to hold them on, and a little bit of handy flux on the solder joints. So with them like that, and keeping your flux wet like that, I'm just going to move them back a little, so the little pile of flux is there. And I'm going to take a piece of hard solder and just kind of place it down somewhere I can see it. And then I'm just going to take the ring itself and place the solder joint on top of the piece of solder. And you want to make sure that it's actually trapped underneath this, because once you start heating this up, it will start blowing your solder around, because your flux will start to boil and move stuff around, and it gets real annoying. But if you keep your ring pressure on top of it, it can't go anywhere, and then once it flows and melts, it'll go right into the solder joint. And to solder all this, I'm not going to use anything fancy. I'm just going to use a plumber's propane torch that basically just has a built-in starter in it, and that's it. Don't get me wrong, you can use something like this, which is a Smith's Little Torch on a oxygen acetylene setup. I'm trying to show that you can use expensive tools or not so expensive tools to basically get the same thing done. So I'm just going to heat these up until the solder starts to flow and it seals in that solder joint, and they will be done. So I heat all of them to dry out their flux, and then I will stay on one until the solder flows. There we go. So it's as easy as that. If you are working with copper or brass, it's going to basically change colors like this really quickly and basically get dirty very quickly. If you're using silver, not as much, and it's a little bit easier to work with. But for practicing purposes or just demonstration, you can use whatever metal. So when picking them all up, you can just pick them up normally, but sometimes they get stuck because the flux basically fuses them to the charcoal block. You can rip them off like this, or you can just run the torch over it and heat it and pull them off easy. So all this is going to go into our pickling solution, which is an acid that will eat all of the fire scale or oxidation off of these and all the remaining flux that's on here, and clean them up. I have a full video on this if you want to check it out in the card above. Alright, so here are all the rings out of the pickling solution. You'll notice that they are now like a pinkish color or copper color. And this is normal when you're working with brass and having to heat it. So you can clean this off just by polishing, but we're not going to worry about that right now. We're going to turn them into the little bales like this. So all you really need are some round nose pliers. You could use other pliers and you'll get different shapes, but I'm going to show you with the round nose ones, and hopefully you have some that are in better condition than mine. You want to take your solder joint, which is right there, you can see it with the little silver bit, and face it on either side. Just don't put it on the outside areas here, if that makes sense. You can take this and put it all the way down to the bottom and open your pliers. So we have pressure on it like that, and we're just going to open this all the way, and it will take the shape of the round part of the pliers and stretch it out. So we will have a little link like this. You can also do this at the smaller point of it. And get a different shape. And like I said, if you have some different pliers with a different shape to them, you can make square ones like this. So it just shows you can get creative with what you use to open these up. One thing you're going to want to look out for in this is how you soldered them. Like this one, I didn't line it up perfectly, so it has a little bit of an edge right here that I can actually catch my nail on. And you can buff that down, but it really should be something like that where there is no edge. So now we just need to take these and turn them into this shape. And in order to do that, we need to re-anneal these because stretching them like this just work hardened all of these. And it makes it a lot harder to bend them when they're like this. So let's anneal these. So when annealing these, and if you don't have a really strong torch, you can set them up like this where they're barely touching anything else, and that means that they don't have anywhere to dissipate heat, so they heat up faster. So that's about it. You just want them to get hot enough that they start to change color and get a little red, but not hot enough that you start melting your solder or melting them in general. So all this needs to go back into the pickling solution to get cleaned up, and then we can start forming them. All right, so here they are all cleaned up for the most part, and I'm just going to take my step mandrel, the smaller one, and use the 4mm part on it. You could really use whatever size you need the opening to be. I'll just take one of these, and since they are annealed now, I can just pull it down and bend it. If you don't have the hand strength, and at a certain point you're not going to be able to close this, So you can use some pliers. I actually suggest using some pliers with teeth so it doesn't slip off. It is going to leave little marks that you're going to have to clean up, but it makes your life a lot easier to close these. And now you just need to even up this area. I'm going to do that with some flat pliers that don't have teeth. So here it is, and it could be a little off like that, and you could just grab pliers and pull it to the side. So here we are, and you'll notice that there's a tiny gap down there, and it's probably too small of a gap to actually put onto our metal. So for this, you just want to test it and see if you can push it on. If you can't, you can open this up a little bit more. So with it opened up more, you can slide it on and slide it up to where you want it to be. So I don't want to just use this square to solder this to and everything, even though this is just for demonstration purposes. So let's make this into something. Oh, one more thing before moving on. You can use a little sanding disc or cutting disc to get between these two to make it flat on the inside, and it makes a better connection when soldering. You could probably also run a saw blade through there if you wanted to. So we're going to make this very simple. Just add some texture to our metal. And there's a couple ways to do that. You can use a hammer and hammer all this in, or you can use a rolling mill and a texture plate. So I'm going to do both just to show you that you can use either one. This particular one was actually hand hammered, so you could see how that looks. All right, so I'm going to use a texture plate and a roller mill for one of them, and then move on to hammering the other one. All right, so here it is with the design on it after I rolled it through. I need to heat it and flatten it out, but I'll do that when I do this piece, because I have to hammer this and it's going to start getting all deformed too. So to hammer this, you want a hard flat surface. I have this anvil. I also have this, which is for stamping and hammering. So I'm going to use that. So you're going to need some sort of hammer to do this. I'm going to be using a variation of different hammers from Fritz, or you could use something like this that has a ball on it. And if you have none of that, you can use some dapping block tools. All right, so here both of them are. And now I need to heat them and flatten them out because they're a little ridiculous with their curving. And then I can cut them out. All right, so I have both of them all flattened out. And now I can cut them into discs, or actually whatever shape I want. But I'm going to use discs just to make it easier. You can use a disc cutter like this, or you can use some sort of stencil. I use a quarter a lot of the time. And just kind of place it on your piece and sketch around it and then saw it out. But yeah, if you do have a disc cutter, just basically put this in there and cut it out. There we go. So for this one, it's going to take a little bit longer, but it will work. So there's our guideline. So now we just need to saw it out. There we go. I need to clean up the edges a little bit because sawing does that. I'm just going to use a file. All right, there we go. So the edges should be nice and smooth and rounded now. Maybe a little bit right here needs to be fixed. But yeah, it's not going to be a perfect circle. Cutting a perfect circle is actually really hard. So that's why they have tools like this to cut out circle blanks or discs like this. But anyways, so to get this on here, you just clip it on. And if you push it too far like that, You can wiggle it back to where you need it to go. It should be pretty tight on here. So there we go, something like that. And you can move this to your liking. And that's how the top will look. Same thing with the other one. And there we go. So now we just need to solder these on. But before we do that, I need to talk about the sponsor for this video. So I thought Skillshare would be a fitting sponsor for my channel, seeing that you come here to learn stuff and Skillshare is a community for learning. And just like with my videos, you can learn at your own pace. And one of the things I really like about it is every class is project oriented. So you're working towards a goal and not just learning random skills. So you'll actually have something by the end of it. So if you are wanting to start out learning some stuff about Fusion 360, I suggest Kevin Kennedy. He has a 3-part class that takes you from installing the program to getting just about all of the basics down. Also, be sure to check out Vladimir Mariano. He has a bunch of classes on 3D printing and how to think in the terms of actually printing out objects, along with teaching you how to use Fusion 360 as well. So the first 1,000 people to click the link in my description will get a free trial of Skillshare Premium. This gives you full access to the entire catalog that Skillshare has to offer. And after that, Skillshare is as low as $10 a month with an annual subscription. So thank you Skillshare for sponsoring this video and supporting my channel. Okay, so I'm going to be using a third hand to hold this piece so I can solder down inside of this little gap in here. You can see that everything is clamped in there pretty nice. So this will hold itself. I'm just going to take a little bit of flux and put it in there. And then I'm going to heat that, just so we can make sure our solder is going to not jump around. So I just put a little bit of flux on my solder and place it in there. And make sure that it is touching the bail and the piece that it's going to be soldering to. Alright, so now that all that is in there, I can heat this until all that melts. And then this will be permanently attached to it. There we go. So now we just need to throw this in the pickling solution to clean it up and solder the other one. So here they are all soldered up and good to go. I'm going to add a dark black patina to these and then tumble them for 2 reasons. One, I'm going to use a medium that's going to make them a matte color and keep a lot of the black in there, and it should look pretty nice. Also, these are really soft now because they're annealed and they're really thin, so these would bend really easily if I don't put them through a tumbler. So I'm going to do that. So the first thing I need to do is actually put them into the liver of sulfur. So as you can see, they're already very dark. So I'm just going to let this sit for about 15 minutes or so and come back. Alright, so that should be long enough. You can see that they are just completely black now. I'm just going to rinse them off and then throw them in the tumbler. This is what's in the tumbler right now. It's basically these stones, and it will leave a matte finish on your work. I'll have links to that in the description. I don't remember exactly where I got it from off the top of my head, so links. But I will throw these both in there, add some water. I have a whole video on the tumbler itself, and I'll make sure to leave links in the description and up here in the card. So I'm just going to put it on here for about an hour and check it, and if it's not to my liking, put it on for another hour. So here they are after an hour being in the tumbler with that stone, and you can see that it has a nice matte finish to it all, and it has all the dark spots down in the patterns. This is the hammered one, and it's going to have designs on the back from all the hammering. So I know this is a very simple design and it didn't really take all that much to do, but I wanted to show that you can make some things that look very detailed or very unique using these simple skills. It's basically just a disc with a jump ring on it, but the jump ring is folded in a way that it looks different, and you could put a chain through this, or you can hook more rings to this and make the whole necklace if you wanted to. And you could play with this and add as many of these as you want. and add stuff to them if you want to. So it's up to you. I just wanted to show basically this part, showing that you can make tons of these things and just clip them onto whatever you want to make into a necklace. Or you could even clip them onto things that you want to add chains to or link together or anything like that. So if you found this helpful at all, leave a like on the video. If you have any questions, leave a comment and subscribe for more videos like this. I have some links to other videos here and here, and that's about it. So I'll see you guys next time. Bye.